there are players you see for the first time, and your brain instantly puts a label on them. Tall, left-handed, huge wingspan. And you think, okay, got it. Nature gave him all the cards. The rest is just a straight path to the top. But Alessandro Michieletto's story is not about raw talent or a gift from above. Because the most interesting thing about him isn't his impressive height. The most interesting thing is how he became who he is. And why inside that perfect volleyball prototype, there's actually a completely different person. To understand Michieletto, you first need to understand one thing. He grew up in a family where sport wasn't just a hobby. It was the natural environment. His father, Riccardo Michieletto, is a former professional volleyball player who later became a manager within the Trentino system. In many articles, they highlight that Riccardo was part of high-level volleyball long before Alessandro became a star. His mom, Eleonora, used to play basketball, so at home there wasn't a line between sport and normal life. Sport was part of everyday routine. Alessandro has two sisters, Francesca and Annalisa, both volleyball players. And that matters not because it sounds cool, but because in a family like that you grow up seeing the real side of sport. The discipline, the travel, the injuries, the losses, the recovery, all of it, without filters. There's also a younger brother, Andrea, who chose football. And that detail says a lot. In this family there wasn't one single path. There was respect for sport and freedom to choose your own direction. And this is where the key theme begins, how exactly his family shaped his character. In interviews, Michieletto almost never talks about being a genius or being lucky. He talks about work and about never stopping. One idea comes back again and again in his words. If you don't walk into the gym every day trying to become better, someone will pass you. And this isn't motivational poster talk. It's his mindset. He explained that his parents helped him stay grounded when things started taking off, because when you're a talented teenager, it's very easy to believe you've already figured everything out. And in volleyball, stories like that end quickly. But he never describes it as strict pressure, more like having the right support system. And here, his father played a special role. When you grow up next to someone who has lived through professional sport, that person understands where people flatter you, where they might use you, when it's time to stay quiet and work, and when you absolutely cannot overestimate yourself after a few good matches. Michieletto speaks openly about it. His father was close, helped him navigate the Trentino environment, but never carried everything for him. He taught him to go through it on his own. So this foundation wasn't about connections, it was about building a real character. Now, here's a detail many people don't know, or underestimate. Alessandro wasn't that 2-meter kid smashing balls in attack from childhood. Up until around 15 or 16 years old, he played libero and was about 185 centimeters tall. Tall for everyday life, sure, but not some future giant dominating the net. And that matters a lot. Libero is a mentality. You're always ready. You don't wait for your ball. You live knowing the next serve or spike could come straight at you. You learn to read hitters' wrists, anticipate tips, hold your platform against crazy jump serves, and reset instantly after mistakes, because the next rally is already starting. When players grow later and switch to outside hitter, they often struggle with reception. But for Michieletto, passing and defense were part of his identity from the beginning. He didn't just learn it, he lived it. In a way, he brought a libero's brain into an outside hitter's body. Then came what many sporting families call a complicated blessing. He started growing late and fast, not a couple of centimeters a year. A real jump around 190, then 200 and eventually 211 centimeters. He once said he didn't even realize at first that he had begun looking down at people from above. And it sounds funny until you understand what rapid growth does to an athlete. Balance changes, coordination changes, timing changes, even your feeling of where your own arms are in space changes. A lot of players struggle during that phase because their brain remembers the old body while the court demands something new. Michieletto admitted he had to relearn movement, timing and rhythm. But he had one advantage: years of libero technique, years of ball control. he didn't rebuild his game through power alone, but through awareness. The move to Trento wasn't just a transfer to another club. It was an early step into adulthood. He has said honestly that leaving home at a young age wasn't easy. There were moments when he wanted to go back, but he would make the same decision again. And that matters because Trentino isn't just chasing youth trophies. Their philosophy is to develop players who can actually become part of the first team. Imagine being 15 and moving to a new city, new school, new friends, living away from your family, building your own daily routine. That's where family upbringing shows itself. Without discipline, you fall apart. And for him, discipline was already part of who he was. Ricardo knew the Trentino environment well, which helped Alessandro understand the system, but he always emphasized that support didn't mean shortcuts. The responsibility was still his. There's a story that perfectly captures who he is. On the day of one of his early matches, he was still a student. He went to the game straight from school, doing homework in the car, preparing for classes, and only later realized he might actually step onto the court. That wasn't a fairy tale moment. That was real life. A teenager suddenly finding himself in a world of adults and not breaking under the pressure. And when you hear stories like that about growing up through sport, you realize something else. Behind big arenas, there's always another side of life. Not titles, not statistics, but people, emotions. Moments when you just want to say thank you. But let's go back to the court. Because while outside the arena, there were simple human moments. Inside the Italian national team, something much bigger was happening. A young player who had just recently been doing math homework on the way to matches suddenly finds himself at the Olympics. And now the players next to him aren't peers, they're legends. He was 19, he made the Olympic roster, and around him were stars he used to watch on TV. He admitted that before the tournament, the emotions were overwhelming. He couldn't sleep properly. But once the match started, he didn't look like a rookie trying to survive. He played calm, focused, like he belonged there. That contrast became his trademark. Emotionally aware of the court, incredibly composed on it. That period became a turning point not only for him, but for how the volleyball world saw him. In one single summer, he lived through several different stories. The Volleyball Nations League, the Olympic Games, the European Championship, and then the U21 World Championship. 4 tournaments, 1 season, almost no breaks in between, dozens of matches, most of them as a starter. In just a few months, he transformed from a young debutante into one of the faces of a new Italian generation. And it wasn't just about playing time, it was a test of character. After a long Olympic run, he could have skipped the youth tournament, nobody would have blamed him. But according to Italian media, he chose to go to help his friends take revenge after previous losses. And that tells you something important. He doesn't look for the easiest path. There are wins that make you stronger as a player, and there are wins that make you happier as a person. The championship with Trentino felt like the second one. He arrived there as a teenager. A 15-year-old who left home, changed schools, adapted to a new city and a new life just for one opportunity, to become part of a club that believed in him early. So when Trentino finally lifted the title for Michieletto, it wasn't just another trophy. It was the end of a long journey. Winning is always beautiful, but winning with the city that raised you hits differently. In the stands were people who had seen him grow up, coaches who trusted him when he was still learning, fans who didn't see just a player but a part of their story. It was the first season he finished with victory instead of heartbreak, and maybe that's why it felt louder than many other titles. Off the court, Michieletto has a very human side. He's a huge Inter fan, not casually, but seriously. He admits that sometimes his mood depends on Inter's matches even more than on his own games. His idol is Javier Zanetti, which says a lot. Zanetti represents discipline, stability, character without unnecessary show. Exactly the qualities people see in Michieletto himself. He's often invited into media projects, but he isn't someone chasing the spotlight. In one interview, he basically said he enjoys hitting the ball more than being part of a show. He understands popularity as a tool for the sport, but deep down, he's still just an athlete, not an entertainer. It's easy to present Michieletto as the perfect volleyball prototype. But his real story is something else entirely. A former libero who became a powerful outside hitter, a late-growth spurt that could have ruined coordination, a family that kept him grounded, a young player who left home early and made adult decisions, an Olympic debut where he didn't get lost among legends, and a calm personality capable of winning big matches. And now the question for you. Is this already his peak, or have we only seen the beginning? Write your thoughts in the comments. As always, this was Nick. Love what you do and you're gonna crush it. See you soon. Bye.